opening this masterclass with this notion of reconciliation. This is what we want, reconciliation in between men and women, for men to support women, for women to dare also to get men's support. For this, I would like to call our second great panelist. She is the First Lady of Iceland, Her Excellency Eliza Reid. Please, come on stage. Thank you so much.
Morning.
Good morning. For coming from so far to the Cannes Movie Festival.
Well, I haven't come as far as a great many people who are here, I think.
Yes, that's true. But your vision on equality, your vision on gender is extremely important because you're not only a role model, but your country is a role model for the world. You know, Iceland right now is, and you can applaud, you know, is #1 in terms of equality, men and women. And this is something that we need to underline. So, as the First Lady, what is your political influence in order to promote feminist diplomacy, having more women in diplomacy today?
That's an interesting question because, of course, I have this title of First Lady, but it's not really a title in a sense. It kind of delineates me as the spouse of someone who has a proper title, who ran for elected office, who is the head of state of the country. Gender equality has always been something that is important to me and something that I wanted to use my platform for when my husband became president. But first I always thought, well, I'm not allowed to talk about that as First Lady because I only have a platform because my husband achieved something. So that's a bit too ironic to then talk about gender equality for that. But I thought that in life, you know, we get various opportunities to speak up and maybe to have our voices heard a little bit more. And it's up to us whether we want to use those opportunities or squander them. And so when you ask about my political influence, of course, I have no direct political influence. I don't represent the government of Iceland. I don't speak for the president of Iceland, but I nevertheless have a voice that I can use. And so when we talk about influence, I like to use myself as an example of the fact that we all have an influence, that we are all role models. And when we are talking about issues such as gender equality, such as empowerment, we need to remember that we all need to be using our voices. We can't push this merely to elected officials. We all have our own duties and responsibilities to be able to nudge things in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Yes. This is very inspiring. Yes, we all have a duty to this, men and women, in terms of a more equal world. First thing is education. Is that correct?
It's one of the most important things, I would say.
So what is different in, I would say, your country's education towards ours, in order for us to really understand how do you let young generation know about the importance of equality from a very young age?
Well, education is obviously very important, and I would say that the idea of equality is kind of baked into Icelandic society. I would emphasize that we are not perfect, but we are doing our best, and I think conscious of the fact, I think as a society, we have passed the tipping point of debating whether or not working towards greater equality is important, but how we are going to get there. So that, of course, gets reflected in our education system as well through a variety of factors. There was, for example, a big campaign recently to hire more male preschool teachers. Because
Excellent.
Role models are a really important dimension of gender equality. And so if all of the people caregiving younger children are women, that's not a very good role model to show that men are excellent caregivers as well.
To remove the stereotype of woman equal care. And this is usually what we're thinking,
Yeah, so anyway, that's just one tiny example of what we're doing in education now. At universities, at the tertiary level, 2/3 of our students are women now in Iceland. So in fact, we need to be examining more why men aren't continuing their tertiary education. So, because again, equality is about equality, you know, leveling the playing field for everyone. So, you know, there's a number of facets to that, I think, in Iceland. Education is one of them, as is representation, as are role models, et cetera, et cetera.
Excellent, yes, hand on hand with men. That's really something that will be kept, in our mind. Do you think more women are needed in the key positions of diplomacy? And what can women bring in the table of negotiation?
Obviously, diversity is a good thing. So diversity of all sorts is something that's important. Not only do we need gender diversity, but we need all kinds of ethnic, cultural, experience diversity really at the table. We're fortunate in Iceland that we have almost 50% women parliamentarians. We're the highest non-quota regulated country in the world when it comes to gender representation. First country in the world to elect a female head of state back in 1980. And I think that really shows in terms of the policies that gets implemented when we have a more gender diverse cabinet, not least because it helps women to stand together, it helps raise our voices and amplify our voices as well. So, I mean, of course it's important. And you talk about diplomacy, you talk about negotiations. We know, for example, that peace negotiations after conflict are longer lasting when women are at the table, or from the beginning. And a lot of things are more effective the more diverse group we have at the table, whatever that table is.
Excellent. We know that, unfortunately, you will leave soon the position of First Ladies in a year. What do you commit to do as a role model after this in order to stay aligned with your fight for women's rights?
I just plan on continuing on being active, on using my voice, on speaking at conferences and events. I wrote a book a couple of years ago that has to do with women and Iceland. Voila. And I've hope to as well continue to write more. Thank you. So hopefully you won't have seen the end of me.
No, we don't want to see the end of you. Could you tell a little bit about the Spraakkaart? You see here you have the French translation, but it has been translated in how many languages?
8, I think now,
okay.
Yes.
Chinese?
No. Japanese, Korean, so...
Maybe in China we might be interested.
Maybe, that would be interesting.
Okay, please. That would be
You all have influence, right? It's a book, can I tell you?
Yeah, please.
It's called The Secrets of the Spraakkaart. Spraakkaart is an Icelandic word that means extraordinary women. And it's a kind of old, outstanding word. But I couldn't think of any words in the English language that we have that describe exclusively women in an exclusively positive way. And I thought, what a great expression or word to introduce to the world, to introduce people through what I call my love letter to Iceland. I was born in Canada, that's why I have this accent. Born and raised in Canada, moved to Iceland for love because I met my Icelandic husband in graduate school. Had no idea he would become president at all. That story is kind of a thread throughout the book a little bit, this idea of making the most of the opportunities we get in life. But really what it is an exploration of this island in the North Atlantic that is closest in the world to closing the gender gap. And it's discussions with almost 40 different women around the country about what it's like to be a mother, an entrepreneur, a politician, a rock star, a poet, a farmer in the world's best country for women. And I deliberately chose women who weren't necessarily the first or the only or the most famous women, because I thought it helps us all to relate to everyday people. As I said, we had the world's first democratically elected female head of state. Many of you maybe have heard of Björk, the singer. We're not all going to be Björk. And I mean, she's wonderful and very special, but I think it adds a connection to us to know that even if we're not Björk the singer, we can still help to bring about change in our environments, in our societies, in our countries. And so these women, some of whom I was so touched because they were so surprised that they wanted to be, I wanted to interview them for a book. And I said, everybody has an important story to tell. And so I hope being able to share some of these stories teaches people a little bit about a country they might not know about, but really inspires us all to make the most of the opportunities we're presented with in life.
Thank you very much. Now, quick question. Why did you accept to sign this International Accord for Women in Diplomacy? Why is it important for you?
I just think it's important to increase visibility throughout the world. We know, again, that as I mentioned before, more diversity in everything leads to better results for everyone. And that's a point that I'd like to underline. When I talk about working for greater equality, that's not a zero-sum game where we take something from one group to give it to another group. It's about leveling the playing field for everybody, and it benefits everybody. So that's something that I think is important, and certainly in the world of diplomacy and in the world of representation, we just need to have more women. And the more that we can do to encourage that and advocate for that, the better.
Thank you so much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in front of your very eyes, I'm going to ask Your Excellency to please sign these international accords for women in diplomacy that, again, promote fighting for women's rights, but not only helping women to have access to a more political world, table of negotiation, being more involved in the world of today.
Now, my mother said, always read everything before you sign it. It's a good rule. But I have read this one in advance, so just so you know that I'm following my mother's advice. We always have to do that, right? Voilà.
Thank you so much, really. Thank you for coming.